This is This Week in Perspective with me, Adam Simbeye. Last week, on the 14th of October 2019, Tanzanians marked 20 years since the death of the beloved founder of the nation, Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere. With, of course, Tanzania marked with extensive coverage first in the print form over a week, and electronic media, TV, radio, newspapers for over weeks, and a series of organized symposia on Mwalimu. This program is joining other Tanzanians and media houses, including TBC, of course, television and radio, to also honor this important day. Many people from all walks of life in the society have expressed their admiration of the late Mwalimu as the founder of this nation, the quality of his leadership, his humility, his love for people, and independent thoughts and principles. Mwalimu is dead physically, but I think many people think he still lives with us, and this was repeated by Professor Palamagamba Kabudi at the symposium on Mwalimu at the Nkrumah Hall in the University of Dar es Salaam, which he says his fight against justice, exploitation, corruption, and have remained cherished goals or issues and administration of Mwalimu. Who was Mwalimu? I mean, many people know who Mwalimu was, but it's not bad to have 4 panelists here discuss who Mwalimu was, because individuals may know Mwalimu in different ways, different forms. I mean, what he was, what he wasn't. But today, let's hear from the 4 specialists here. They will tell us who Mwalimu was. So, I'm joined by well-versed, knowledgeable, as well as experienced people working with him to try and analyze and discuss his life. On my right, there is a media consultant, Joseph Mwamnyange. Then Professor Gaudens Mpangala, formerly with the Institute of Development Studies, University of Dar es Salaam, but for a number of years now with the Ruaha Catholic University in Iringa. On my left is Professor Daudi Mukangara, who is a political scientist with the Department of Political Science and Public Administration, University of Dar es Salaam. Last but not least is Dr. Brevius Kahyoza, an economic analyst, and he does teach at the Kampala International University. The 4 panelists are very regular. Of course, we've missed Professor Mpangala and Professor Mukangara for some time, but they are regular participants, so they're versed with how we operate this program. So welcome again, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Viewers, as usual, I have to apologize. I couldn't get gender balance. The 2 ladies are invited for some reason or the other, but understandable reasons, they couldn't make it today. So it's only an all-men panel. Nonetheless, let us hope they will help us analyze who Mwalimu was and what he did and what he stood for. Welcome to the program again.
Thank you, Mr.
Now, let me start with Professor Mpangala on my right, though I'm not a rightist. Professor Mpangala, who was Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere? First, as a leader, and as a person, can you tell the viewers who this Mwalimu was?
Thank you very much. Thank you also for inviting me to participate in this panel, very important panel. Mwalimu, a lot has been said, particularly towards this commemoration of 20 years on Mwalimu. Our work today is to summarize what has been said. And my summary puts Mwalimu in 4 important domains. We have to take all aspects that has been describing Mwalimu in terms of books and so on and so on. I put them in 4 important domains. The first domain is Mwalimu as a leader, leadership, and nation building aspects. The second domain, Mwalimu as a liberator. The third domain, Mwalimu as a humane person. And for the fourth domain, Mwalimu as a philosopher. I will be brief because within in the context of all these four domains, there is a lot to say.
Yes.
But I will try to be very brief.
Okay.
Beginning with the leadership domain, Mwalimu was an exemplary leader. Mwalimu was a leader. You can see his leadership in various aspects. His leadership was first of all, he began to show his leadership talents when he was still a student at Makerere, who was a leader of the TAA branch, Tanganyika African Association branch.
Even at Mwinsongo, the primary school, I'm sure, he must.
He might. When he was teaching at St. Mary's, he was also leader of the branch of Tanganyika African Association.
St. Mary's, this is...
St. Mary's Secondary School. After completing Makerere, he came to teach.
That's Mirambo School at Tabora.
Yeah.
Yeah. He actually taught my elder sister, my elder brother.
Then University of Edinburgh, when we were in Scotland, there he was a leader also of the branch of the Tanganyika African Association, of course people coming from that. So you can see a man who had talents of leadership from his youth stage in different perspectives. But Mwalimu as a leader, because a leader, not only a leader, but a good leader. The way he admired and tried to apply democratic principles of democracy. That's why he always insisted that leaders must follow the constitution and the laws. Political leaders must arise out of the people. They must be elected. So his perspective of leadership, who should be the leader, was very clear. But most important as a leader, vision, a man of vision, and a man of correct decisions at the correct time. Vision, he had a vision how to build a new Tanganyika and later on Tanzania. What type of nation should it be? He had a vision. Very clear vision. Must build a socialist and self-reliant society. That was a vision. And how to do it. That's a vision. A leader must have a vision. But decision-making processes, I can take just a few examples. There are many examples. The decision to resign as a teacher at Pugu. The headmaster advised him, please do away with politics, concentrate on your teaching. The next morning, resignation. That was a decision. There's another important decision, the Tabora Great Meeting of TANU, 1958. There was a debate for about 5 days, TANU members. the majority opposed to participate in the 1958 elections because the colonialists had put many conditionalities which were difficult. But Mwalimu insisted that we must participate. We must participate.
He gave reasons, of course.
Yeah, he gave reasons. We must have members in the Legislative Council. That's a very big step. TANU must have members in the Legislative Council. We must participate. Mtemvu resigned from TANU and established his own political party, African National Congress. But he insisted we must participate, and he participated. So the elections of 58 to 59, TANU scored 38 out of, 28 seats out of 30. Arising out of his decision to participate. The third example of decision making as a leader, the war with Uganda. You know, Idi Amin invaded the northern part of Tanzania, north of Kagera, and Idi Amin declared that now is part of Uganda. It's no longer part of Tanzania. So the job of Tanzania was to drive him away from that area. And he did that. But then he decided, he said that that's not enough. Let us stop Idi Amin from power.
Push him far away from Kampala.
OAU chairman and many advised him not to enter Uganda, not to go and fight Idi Amin in Uganda, inside Uganda. If we had driven him away, now it's enough. He said, no, tutampiga, we are going to beat him. And so he did. And he succeeded to topple Idi Amin. You see, to liberate the people of Uganda from a dictator. Yeah, this is just examples of who is a man of leadership, because it was not easy to fight your enemy in his country, and you think he will defeat him. It was not easy. And supported by
Libya.
3,000 soldiers from Libya. Libya threatened him, said that withdraw your forces from Uganda, or else we are going to support Idi Amin. Withdraw in 24 hours. He said, I'm not going to withdraw. Bring your soldiers in Uganda. They will see fire. So this is an example of just a few examples of how Mwalimu was a leader.
Just before you move ahead with the next domain, on the same principle of leadership, who must make decision. I'm sure you recall, those of us who are the same age, maybe he wouldn't, when we had trouble with the East Germany and West Germany on the issue of opening the embassy or the consulate in Zanzibar. When we did that, the West German said, no, you can't have these diplomatic relations with East Germany, because East Germany and West Germany were different. Western country or whatever, and the other one they are pursued as non-democratic communists. Mwalimu said, you are threatening me? He gave them 24 hours to move out of here, completely. I remember that was was it not 1960 something or 70? 64. And then he cancelled all the projects, promises of West Germany to support Tanzania. And, you know, they were going to support us to...
Including Nkrumah Hall.
Yes. To buy ammunition, planes, whatever. He said, to hell with you. He didn't want. That was a very important decision, too. I'm sorry to add to that.
Yes. I said this is another very important example.
Yes.
So the second domain, Mwalimu is a liberator. Certainly he liberated Tanzanians, the people of Tanganyika from colonialism. Very systematically. He said that is not enough, we shall light the torch on the Mount of Kilimanjaro so that the whole of Africa is liberated. And he did that practically by supporting liberation struggles all over Africa. But that was not enough. Mwalimu was also made efforts to liberate the third world from being dominated by the capitalist countries, the developed capitalist countries. As chairman of the South Commission, most of that report, his ideas, liberation. He was a man who hated to see people oppressed and exploited. Always emphasized oppressed and exploited. So he was a liberator. This one of his domains. The third domain, a human character. First, himself as a simple person, simplicity. Kikwete said, hakujimwamba fai.
That's interesting.
He did not mwambafy himself. He was very simple, close to the common people. Very simple, living a very simple life. His house in Butiama was very simple. I just need a room for a bed, a room for a library and my books, and a sitting room. That's enough. So many big people visited him, including a minister from Prime Minister, I don't know, from Britain, was surprised. Is that where you live, President? And when he was sick now, when he went to London, before he was admitted in St. Thomas Hospital, he decided to stay in a compartment, a normal compartment. The lady was surprised to say that this was the president, and now he's the Baba wa Taifa of Tanzania. Very simple.
Yeah. Okay, Professor. So, if you could go on into the fourth domain, yeah.
The fourth domain. So that, is the philosopher. That's all the three domains are reflected in his philosophical ideas and the writings. The philosophy on Ujamaa, African socialism, philosophy on African democracy, the philosophy on the liberation of Africa. He said, African countries where it is possible to get independence without fighting, let them struggle for independence without fighting. But in those colonies where it is not possible, let them fight and let us support them.
Philosophical. Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much, Professor. Professor Buchanan, we gave substantial time to Professor Mpangala, historian, political scientist as well.
Yes, it's fine. First of all, just a small correction.
Yes.
In May of this year, I retired completely.
You have?
Yes.
No more on contract?
No, I was on contract.
Yes.
Had been for a long time.
So I should address you as former academic.
Precisely.
At the University of Dar es Salaam.
I still have a few connections with the university, such as in supervising students with their dissertations and so on, but otherwise I'm out of it.
All right.
As it were, so just that correction aside. I agree with Professor Mpangala. And basically what we are doing is a summary.
Yes.
Because so much is well known about Julius Nyerere. This is where I'd look at it, and a lot of it actually, I think, repeats what Professor there said. He was a leader committed to protecting human dignity. I think that was what kept him throughout his life. Sometimes he made mistakes.
Yes.
In trying to protect human dignity. The Biafra case, for example, I always give this as an example. So But we understood him because that's where he was coming from, protecting human dignity, particularly of Africans, because they had been so oppressed, made undignified for several centuries, I mean, starting with slavery and so on. So he really was concerned with that, you know, lifting African people particularly out of that undignified status. He was also a leader determined to lead, or at a minimum, contribute to lifting his people out of poverty, disease, and ignorance. Those three problems which he identified himself.
He called them enemies.
Yes, those enemies. So that means because he was a person who could pursue that relentlessly, you know, doing it full time rather than part time like many of us,
Yes.
that meant that he was doing development issues permanently throughout his life. He was committed to finding solutions for our development problems because he wanted to lift his people out of that poverty, ignorance, and disease. And of course, and I think Professor Mpangala has just touched on that in terms of his commitment to liberation. This was a person given to fighting colonialism and imperialism, if we might add, in all its forms. And he did that, I think, very well. His commitment to liberation was partly out of that, but also in order that all Africans, and not just Tanzania or certain parts of Africa, but all Africans, if possible, also all other black people be liberated
Wherever they are.
wherever they were. So this is what I would say is my summary of his particular attributes.
Thank you very much, Professor Mkangara. Let me turn to Joe as a media consultant. The same question again. I mean, you had Professor Mpangala there next to you, and now Professor Mkangara. They've all given a summary because a lot of information has been out there through the media, electronic and print, and symposium, people discussing, people being interviewed. What would you say to that?
First and foremost, you know, to speak up after these two professors, they've
Yes.
summarized everything. But I'm very happy this year that the media has done justice to Mwalimu. They've carried a lot of articles, you know, clips on his speeches, quotes. You know, it's very good. And, you know, Professor Mpangala was talking about Mwalimu as a person. You know, Mwalimu commanded respect, not because he made people to, but because of his demeanor, you know, his stature, the way he was. You saw his humility made him know to be accepted by people that respected him, not out of our respect, but because of
Not
what
out
he
of
was.
fear.
Not out of fear. They respected him because of what he was, what he stood for. You know, he was so simple. I was, just before we came to the program, I told you when I was still schooling in Zambia, he came and he gave a speech. You know, there were TANU branches in Zambia as well. And when he came there, you know, all Tanzanians that were living there, they went to listen to him. And after he spoke, then somebody said, Pasua Mwalimu. I couldn't understand what he meant that time, you know. You know, then I looked at the person, I said, I was very young, I said, but how come this is the president of my birthplace, my country. You know, he was accepted, not only here. If you went to Zambia, Mwalimu was, you know, in a class of his own, you know. He's somebody that would attract a lot of people when they hear that Mwalimu was there.
Actually, Nigerians love him when
Yes.
they understand that you are from Tanzania. When he was still alive or even after death, they respect you.
Yeah, and you know, but I'm disappointed over one thing. The media also try to ask the younger generation about Mwalimu. I'm disappointed that maybe it's us that are failing the younger generation to understand Mwalimu. Some of them just gave the wrong answers about Mwalimu. A few that would tell Mwalimu, you know, and surprisingly, the smaller ones, and maybe they're going to better schools. The smaller ones like Standard 4, 5, they gave you a very good picture of who Mwalimu was. But when they talked to people that were in high school, even some university graduates, you know, the knowledge of Mwalimu is so scanty. I don't know what is happening. Somewhere there is something wrong. You know, we need to, you know, to do this work so that people know Mwalimu. You know, we shouldn't just talk about, you know, people want to speak about Che Guevara. You know, we have our own heroes like Mwalimu. You know, he hasn't received his sainthood. You know, people are thinking about that. So it shows how human he was. You know, how simple he was. The man was very simple. He had his weaknesses. He had his failings.
Well,
as a
human being has
yes,
weaknesses.
But if you look at on the strength that he had, it far outpaces the weaknesses that he had. You know, he's somebody that you know. I remember in our group, Derek Morusuli, is, you know, he made a suggestion, and some people agreed that, you know, we should make a statue of Mwalimu, a state, you know, a very big one, not like the one Mandela. Not of Mandela. It should be bigger than Mandela, because he's bigger than Mandela. He led to Mandela being freed, you know. So many people agreed that, no, we should have this monument that built, you know, whatever we can build it with.
It should be a place of interest for Tanzania and outsiders.
You know, it's interesting. If I can, just jump in here.
Yeah, come in.
You know, when he died, and he had all these representatives, high-ranking officers, including presidents and prime ministers, coming to his funeral here in Dar es Salaam, I was interested in listening to their comments on Mwalimu. Now, here's what I found interesting in relation to what you just said. Madeleine Albright comes in representing USA, and she's asked the same question: what did you think of Mwalimu? And she says, well, he was good, probably close to people like Mandela in terms of stature. And then Mugabe comes in, the late Mugabe comes in later. They asked him the same question, and he was so quick. He says, he was the best of us all.
Wonderful.
And I thought, so I was saying it in relation to your comparison.
Madeleine Albright is American first, although of course of Czechoslovakian descent, but she's typical American.
Absolutely, yes.
Anyway,
so that's that, you know. He's a person. There was this white man, you know, in the same vein when they came, then he was so surprised that, you know, Mwalimu led this poor country, and they were still poor when he died. But how come there is outpouring of grief when he has died? You know, he couldn't understand that, you know, there's so many poor people in Tanzania, but their leaders died. They still so, and they feel it. You know, he could see it. He couldn't understand what, you know, maybe he thought that because they were poor, then they should blame their leader that, no, because they are poor because of him. But it's because of the respect that he commanded that everybody felt felt the loss.
Thank you. Your respect. Sorry to come to you now. We have to be, because it's all summary. 55 minutes, you can't talk much and complete everything when discussing Mwalimu. But you have tried our best so far. Economic analyst, I mean, tell us, there could be issues of the economy and all these, because there are a few blames that Mwalimu was not mastering the economic aspects of his country and all that, but he had his principles too.
Yeah,
can the viewers hear about it from you?
Thank you very much, and I'm glad that I'm sitting with you all. I think we were there during his leadership, at least. When he died, I was in Standard 5. I was 9 years of age, 1999. But I have at least done my best to read about him and to question some leaders and elders about him. Number two, before I go further, I think we have also to make this in its clarity. I've had voices of saying Mwalimu, of course, had his own mistakes, and that's a very good thing to recognize. But again, there is a problem in it, because some people are trying to turn it to show that Mwalimu was his success are found in his failures. I think it should be the opposite side, that his failure was in his success. So he was a failure in success. He wasn't a success in failure. That has to be put
Can
in
you tell
context.
tell the viewers what's the difference?
Yes, but when you say that it was a failure and success, that means much of what he had done is enshrined in the good things he had done, not the bad things he had done. When you say someone is a success in failure, that means everything or most of the things he or she did were enshrined in the bad things, and therefore few things were good. I think this is the distinction we have to make. Mwalimu was a failure in success.
I totally agree
Really.
with you.
Number two, I think is what they have said about the philosophies, the way he had the
leadership
vision.
quality, the
I think he was intellectually astute. I think you can say that, and from the economic perspective, I'd say much later. Number two, if I was from Israel, you know, they have coined a word of their iconic leaders. They call them Bittus. A Bittus is an activist, a leader who is an activist, but at the same time pragmatic. And the Mwalimu was pragmatic indeed, and he was a Bittus. We cannot deny that from we can't take that away from what he did. Number three is on the economic front. I think he was a very smart guy. If you go through what he had done and contextualize of what was happening by then, and where he wanted to go, as Professor said, and there's few issues I would like to start with. Number one is that the way he showed the world of what should be done as far as humanism is concerned from the economic perspective. You remember in his essays, one of his essays about equality, Usawa, in fact he corrected what they wrote on the manifesto of the United States when they were struggling to get the independence. That was written by Thomas Jefferson, the Friends, where they said, we know these are the many principles, all human beings are equal. And the Mwalimu rewrote that and said they would have written that we know these rights must be observed, but all human beings are not equal. He said they are equal in their humanism, but they are different when it comes to features like productivity and the rest. That was the economic concept. So he understood that there are people who have different talents, you may be better educated than someone else, and therefore your success, of course, will vary depending on those issues.
Yes.
And that was very important. And he went further, looking at that in terms of what he had done. You know, I think much has not been written about the economy of Mwalimu. That is surprising, and much has not been contextualized. And let me take some of the issues. If you look at the tenure of his leadership between 1970s, let me start from there, we'll go back, 1970s to 1980s. You know, Mwalimu had borrowed almost 6.7 billion US dollars to fund different kinds of government projects. Now, during that period of time, Mwalimu had managed, of course, to do a lot about humanism. As we talk, the economics that works for the people. And some would say he had his own ways of sanitizing capitalism. And what he did, you know, you remember in those 10 days, 10 years, he had managed, of course, to make sure that over 3 million people, young people, were in primary schools, over 10,000 schools were built, and these at least for every village. And we can remember that the literacy level had reached almost 85%. It was among the best in African countries.
We were actually ranked first.
We are the
Yes,
first, yeah.
the
And
standard-
UNESCO.
Yeah, sure. The standard 7 graduates had increased from 21% in 1971 to 90% in 1981. That was remarkable. And then you see that the infant mortality had reduced by almost 3% or 4%. And production in the industries were huge. And to put that in context, I've heard people, he said people were getting the numbers wrong. He had built almost 45 textile units between 1970s and 1980s. And that is not giving maybe the clear picture, but I wanted to conceptualize. I was reading somewhere. We are lucky that we're living in the times where some people have done a lot of researches. One is Angus Maddison. And Angus Maddison had done the research of the best economies in the world for the 200 years ago, 2 centuries, so to speak. And what he found that in 1890s, the economy of Germany United Kingdom, United States, France, Belgium, and Netherlands, they had the per capita income, the purchasing power parity of almost $3,400 of the current prices, of which we are at the moment. Now, by that time in Tanzania, it was almost 1,200. But you look, the level of the quality of people was 10 times higher if you take that 10 years period than that of France in 1890, where France had the purchasing power parity of 3,000.
So you're saying there was a gap despite the economic
growth, and that
in terms of quality.
And that Mwalimu was able to balance that and bring that in the context of equality, and that's the economy we want. And remember, if you are to bring it today's times, between 2009 and 2013, we borrowed over $10 billion US. But look at the nature, I mean the stability of people's lives was wanting, or is wanting even today, compared to those 10 years. So you can say, economical, he was that a strong person. And as Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, that a leader, I mean a general, must see what the soldiers don't see. He must know what the soldiers don't know. And he was, I think, in that category, he was very, very powerful. And let me finish with this point of, because you don't run well the economy if you don't run well the politics. And I've had people say, you know, he was authoritarian.
If there's no peace and security in the country.
He was authoritarian. And I think these people are missing the point. That is intellectual lessons of its own kind. I think people should go back and look at what had happened. He knows better than us, maybe. Between 1950s and 2000, there were 476 almost coups, globe-wise. At the global
military coups?
Military coups.
Yes.
And between that period, there were 206 in Africa. The success rate, it was 105 against 100. So 105 succeeded. And remember, Nigeria had 13 years of coups after independence. Now, during that time, a pragmatic leader as he was, what options he had? The options were to make sure that he stabilized the country and then putting that. Now, the iron of the matter is, we want to be forgiven if we try to imitate or to go back of where he moved us from, because there were circumstances. Yeah. And we have to put it into context. In 1960, of what it has been circulating in the social media, the clip of they've shown it was 1959. But I've researched it to 1960 on the Human Prospect, where he said, when he was asked about political parties, he defended the argument very well. He said, look, oppositional political parties in the country can only be meaningful if and only if we are independent. Now, the question we have to be asking ourselves is about the independence of the political independence on one side, and the economic independence on the other side. So circumstances were different. And if you look between 2000 and 2010, you can see on every decade there were coup attempts of an average of 44 against the last decade, which were 17. So we are in a different era that you could not compare.
Yes, even the 1964 mutiny, the soldiers at the Koito barracks and all that, would you classify that as a military coup? Personally, I don't think it was.
Well, Nyerere didn't classify it as a military coup.
You see? It was dissatisfaction among them.
One small point I want to, at the global stage, he talked about the liberation. He liberated not only Africa, but I think the rest of the world. There are 2 or 3 scenarios. In Brazil, there's what they call Bolsa Familia. It's the likes of TASAF in this country.
Okay.
Now, the Bolsa Familia, the way it was formulated, in the initial stages, 3 main public economists in Brazil, they were arguing on the basis of Mwalimu's arguments. And in fact, they mentioned Nyerere as a leader whom they would imitate in terms of their thinking. And the Bolsa Familia has been successful for the last 20 years. It has moved over 100 people out of poverty. You remember we have a chart of people's
It's
participation.
100 million?
100 million people.
Yeah.
You remember we have a chart of people's participation in development in Africa. The meeting was held in Arusha in 1990, and the UN Economic Commission adopted that. You know, in their recommendations, they say this is the Africa we wanted, and some of the issues we have to bring on board were Mwalimu's thinking. So you can see that even that has championed the way, he influenced the world. Today, an election has started, the hanky-pankies of elections in the United States. The supporters of Andrew Yang, who is the Democratic
candidate, yes.
candidate, you know, they are associating themselves with socialist, arguments and angles of leading the economy. You know, Professor Scott Stein is arguing on the basis of supporting socialism. But what he's saying look, there were leaders before us, and one of them is mentioning Nyerere, and I would like people to go on his article of 2019 May. So you can see that that was not a simple person. In Jaramogi Oginga's words, would say he was a political but an economic giraffe. So at this point,
thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for your analysis, Braviers. Professor, I mean, as a liberator, yes, his role is very well known, at least we in Tanzania. But how about the people whom he helped to liberate in Southern Africa? Do they really remember him?
Oh, certainly they remember him. Of course, there was a period when they were acquired and there were questions, how is Tanzania benefiting? He sacrificed a lot. But in recent years or recent periods, they have come up. I think they are thankful to what Tanzania did in terms of assisting liberation struggles in Southern Africa. You know, when the current president visited Namibia, South Africa, and so on, there is that spirit of looking at Tanzania as really a country that has helped a lot in the liberation struggles in Southern Africa.
Yes. Mwalimu, Joe, you come in here. Mwalimu was really a strong and well-respected leader in Africa as well as outside their borders. I recall somewhere, whether this is hearsay or not, he was actually going to attend the heads of state and the government of the Commonwealth countries. I think it was either Australia or New Zealand. And by then, Britain was under Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. So the story goes, she walked into the conference hall and looked around. There were so many African leaders, you know, in their suits and whatever. He looked around. Then I think he asked one of his officials or leaders from the British government, and he said, I don't see Julius around here. What is happening? Is this complete really? I don't think so. Which means, at that point in time, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom knew if Africa is really represented, it is represented by Julius Nyerere. And he noticed his absence, but later on he came. Now, what was so specific in terms of his contribution to our education, our social services, social development in Tanzania? And then I'll come to you, Professor, because times we might be running, his contribution to democracy and multi-party politics, and the media freedom as well. Professor.
You know, I said earlier that Nyerere was a person committed to development full-time.
Yes.
Unlike some of us who go to it part-time. Actually. Well, I really mean that. If you look at his history, even before he became president, before he became the actual government leader of Tanzania, you see him struggling with questions of development as such. And that occupied him throughout. What is important, and I know, and I'm quite happy that the economist Kayoza here has said it very clearly. That was also a very smart guy economically, which is not a view that is shared by many economists previously. But I've had this view myself as well, because if you look at the general statistics, Kayoza started from 1970. Okay, but if I take the statistics of the 15 years from 1961, 62, or thereabout, up to about 1976, you find an economy that was running very well. Okay, the IMF, for example, which tends to think it has the ability to judge how well an economy is running, was was praising Tanzania quite a lot. In fact, even suggesting to Tanzania to get rid of its many reserves.
Because there was too much.
As it were, because we were earning a lot as such. But I take the point which I want to emphasize now, which is that the Nyerere leadership made sure that there was a balance between the physical infrastructure on which they embarked and which they felt was necessary to have growth. They balanced that with the provision of social services. Okay, and that's extremely important. This is a question we debate these days, every day, as such. The Nyereres had this under his leadership. They knew this. It was important to invest in social services as such. So that's why there was quite a lot of investment in education, free education, of course, quite a lot of it in health. And they were embarking on trying to provide water. They didn't quite succeed there, perhaps because of the limitation of resources and so on. But you could see that kind of commitment to that. One could get into detail about this.
I know. I wish I had more than
But the other thing, Prof,
minutes.
The other thing is, there are times that we failed as a country, not because there were bad policies, it's because of external forces. The colonialists weren't happy that we are independent, and they never wanted us to be economically independent. Like he was saying, we had the highest literacy level in Africa, one of the best in the world. They weren't happy. If you have people that don't know anything, can't read and write, they'll be happy to see that. Because when you have many people that can question, even the IMF, like you were saying, when they come here, they can question them. They wouldn't be happy.
Yeah. Now that we're on the floor, because we don't have much time, how was the media under Mwalimu? I mean, you must have a bit of history there.
One funny thing is, under one-party state, even with very few newspapers, one radio, the media was very vibrant. We have so many newspapers, so many TV stations. It's not as vibrant as it was that time. And before, because I won't have any other time, I'm also disappointed with what is happening on the political arena. It's one thing that Mwalimu was against, starting to discriminate your friends or people. There are these sentiments I'm hearing even from the ruling party that, if you elect somebody from the opposition, you won't see any development. I'm very disappointed. I'll be very honest with you. I'm very disappointed.
Fine, thank you very much.
Yeah.
You're disappointed. I'm sure many will be. Professor, very quickly before we wind up, how did he? How do you rate him in terms of development of democracy and a multi-party system? Quickly.
No, Mwalimu believed in both one-party democracy and multi-party democracy. Both. But he said with Nkrumah, at the time towards independence, they said multi-party democracy is very important for the development of any country. But given the conditions of Africa, soon after independence, they have many problems. We shall need at this period one-party system.
Okay.
But
Which, of course, he changed later.
But later on, he was in a forefront to advocate multi-party politics when
Because the commission had
when
said,
time came, and multi-party democracy. And therefore, within that context, freedom of the people, freedom of opinion, fight against all forms of segregation. He was against that. Be it ethnic segregation, racial segregation, religious segregation, political segregation, all forms of segregation. Humans should not segregate each other.
I'd like to add an explanation to that, and I agree with you totally.
And probably while you're on the floor,
yes.
Professor, you might as well just sum up.
Yes, that's
all
what
the
I'm
challenges
trying to do.
under
Yes, about
Badimo
this,
and
I'm happy that this subject came up just now. Okay. Nyerere was never, ever committed to a one-party state. It was because of circumstances.
Yeah.
He said it himself many times over. It was not an ideological thing, a philosophical thing, or anything like that. In fact, one of his friends, Robert Mugabe, at some point suggested that they should establish in Zimbabwe a one-party system because it augurs very with socialism. He rebuked him. He says, no, the one-party state came because of circumstances.
Yes.
That meant that if circumstances changed, you could get rid of the one-party state. Which is why, for me, it's quite logical for him, when circumstances changed, to dump the whole idea of a one-party state.
Yes.
And therefore to embrace pluralism.
Okay. One challenge, the last question, because time I'm warned is up. What, if any, other challenges during Mwalimu's leadership and maybe still facing this country after his death? One or two quickly. We'll go around and end up.
Yeah, no, well, just very quickly, the development challenges are still there. They are huge. I mean, our governments have tried, in the area of eradicating poverty, disease, ignorance. And I think in terms of ignorance, as you all said here, we did a lot in the first 15 years, I think probably 20 years and so on. We have regressed a bit, I hear, from the statistics we get and so on. But overall, of course, development solutions are very complex solutions as such, and we still have a huge problem in the development area.
And they
Those
can
are
be
the
resolved
challenges.
in one day.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very quickly, any challenge?
Two challenges. Now, and number one is
Maybe one will be okay. Time seems to be against.
one is I think on the economy of our country in relation to the international economy. There was the thinking that Mwalimu advocated isolationism, which is not, because on two occasions in 1968, in Uhuru na Ujamaa, he said clearly that our policy on self-reliance is not about isolationism. In 1975, on the state banquet in England, he said eloquently that Tanzania was not intending to dispatch itself from the world. We shall want to borrow and we shall want to trade. So this is happening now. You can see people are thinking self-reliance means isolationism. One small point to the young people of my age who have managed to assert themselves to the central axis in power, who are trying to weaponize Nyerereism. I see some people masquerading to be defenders of our unity, defenders of our economic record, patriotism, and so forth and so on. But in a way, they are practicing what political toddlers would do at the detriment of our own peace. Remember, John Garang said that South Sudan's problem is not peace. Even the graveyard is peaceful. So you have to understand that, I think.
Thank you very much. Very quickly, one point we wind up. I'm told we only have 2 more minutes. Quickly, Joe.
I just hope for the politicians to tone down their rhetoric, because it might lead this country to turmoil.
All right, Professor. Very quickly.
Oh, very quickly. The change from socialism to capitalism was done in such a way that Nyerere, until he died, he was not happy to see how Tanzania had jumped to capitalism. Certainly, Tanzania needed reforms.
Yes.
Needed reforms to better its life. But the overthrow of the Arusha Declaration and the jump towards capitalism
Yeah.
was not there.
Thank you very much, my dear panelists. I'm sorry. I wish we had more time to discuss Mwalimu, because there's so many things you can discuss Mwalimu, but in 55 minutes, what can you do? As you rightly said, we were just doing a bit of summary, because for the last 2-3 weeks until the climax on the 14th, a lot has been said about Mwalimu. Thank you very much, my panelists. My dear viewers, Mwalimu will always be remembered, adored, loved, and cherished. If only we as a country could do more of what he stood for in terms of his principles and started with, the country should continue to be strong, with strong unity, coherence, and peaceful and people development-centered approach. That's all we have for you today. Until next Monday at the same time, and on Thursday at 15 hours for the repeat program. And we have my very able panel, Joseph Mwamnyange, Professor Gaudi Simpangara, Professor Daudi Mokangara, Dr. Bravias Kayoza, and TBC Kuru. Thank you, viewers, and bye-bye.